darkness to the grave. I know pain is just a place. The will has been broken. Don't let the fear become the hate. Don't take the sadness to the grave. I know the fight is on the way. When the signs have been chosen, you never leave home, never let go. You'll never make it to the grave. I know. Open up your eyes, keep your eyes open. Tell me you're strong, tell me you see. I need to hear it. Can you promise me to keep your eyes open, my love? Show me your heart, show me your heart. You know I'll never let you fall apart. Keep your eyes open, my love. Keep your eyes. Keep your eyes open.
Sometimes I hate every single stupid word you say. Sometimes I wanna slap you on your whole face. There's no one quite like you. You push all my buttons down. I know life would suck without you. At the same time, I wanna hug you. I wanna wrap my hands around your neck. You're an asshole, but I love you. And you made me so mad, I ask myself why I'm still here. Or where could I go? You're the only love I've ever known. But I hate you, I really hate you so much. I think it must be true love. True love, it must be true love. Nothing else can break my heart like true love. True love, it must be true love. No one else can break my heart like you. Just once, try to wrap your little brain around my feelings.
Good evening. My name is Tony Postgen. Normally, Mr. Rick Dawson does this whole master ceremony thing. He's kind of occupied right now. We've had some travel issues with some of our speakers coming in late because of weather, so he's taking care of that. So if you're hoping for Mr. Dawson up here, I know he's a lot better looking, so I apologize. So I have a handful of just really short little housekeeping things here. If you haven't got your free magazine / program, there are a number of them in the back. Make sure you grab one of those. And make sure if you're a student that you get your little passport card back there so you can get your stamp for having attended this evening. Because the instructors are going to require you to verify that, so make sure you get that. If you're on Twitter, it's hashtag CI Week this week, so there's a whole lot of discussion and dialogue as a result of that. Please silence all your electronic devices so they don't go off during the presentation. Also, be sure before you leave tonight to check out our bookstore back at the table. We have a number of books from current and past CI Week speakers. Every one of those books on the table up there has been written by a past or current CI Week speaker. Tonight's speaker, Mr. Tom Eakin, his book is back there, Finding Success. Very good book. I suggest you buy it. And I'm sure he'll be happy to sign it for you. At this time, I would like to bring to the podium our introducer of our speaker, Clyde Evans. Clyde Evans is with the City of West Des Moines Economic Development Department.
Thank you very much, Tony. And we were commenting earlier, this reminds me of church. Everybody's sitting in the back of the room. So, well, really the speaker tonight, we have a great pleasure of having Tom Eakin here. Tom is founder of Boom Life, and also He, as Tony has mentioned, the author of Finding Success, Get What You Really Want. Tom originally hails from the Adirondack region of Upper New York, and he currently lives in the thriving metropolis of Jefferson, South Dakota. If you don't know where that is, I had to look it up myself. It's somewhere over near Sioux City. Tom is a former Army Ranger, so don't give him any trouble. And he's qualified as a combat engineer officer. He has a master's in business administration, a master's certificate in executive coaching, and his passions are advocating for veterans and entrepreneurs. And I want you all to give Tom a great Iowa welcome. Tom.
Thank you, Clyde. I appreciate it. Oh, a lot of people showed up in the last few minutes. Not what? Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. As Clyde said, my name's Tom Eakin. And last night I had the pleasure of getting here on time to meet Danny Beyer, who spoke, and to see his presentation. And I noticed, I kind of chuckled when someone in the back of the room said, asked a question about networking. He said, "Hey, Danny, what if I don't have a professional position? What do I put on my business card? What should I put on there?" And I chuckled because, hey man, if you're in here tonight, I call myself the success engineer. That's what I put on my business card, and I made it up. It's just a title that I just made up. But I'd also say be careful if you're going to do something like that, because there's a reason why I made that title up. I'm the only guy in the world who would call himself that, but there's a reason why, and I'm going to spend the next hour or so, or two, helping you understand why I believe I should be called that. So, as Clyde said, I grew up in the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York, had a forest ranger for a father, and this was a guy who I had a lot of hero worship for, and kind of a little bit of a love-hate relationship growing up also. But he was a great example to me when it came to helping people. And if there was one thing I knew when I grew up, I knew I wanted to help people, and kind of like my dad did. And the picture you see on the screen right now is something that my dad had just printed out on a piece of paper, hanging up above his desk. It's a Norman Rockwell painting of him looking in a mirror at himself and painting what he sees. And next to it, it says, it said this in my dad's version also, every painting is a self-portrait of the artist who paints it. And that was something that really stuck with me as I grew up. It, for some reason, made an impression, and it's going to tie in, believe me, as we go forward. So let me see a raise of hand, a show of hands. Who wants to be successful and happy? Let's see. Everybody. Whoa. I get a 100% success rate when I ask that question. So who can tell me what makes them happy? Let me hear some input from you folks. What makes you happy? Yes, sir.
Using my creativity.
Using your creativity. Art. Okay. Fast cars. Awesome. See what happens when you sit in the white seats? Yes. Impacting others. Great. Good answers. So I'm going to tell you, in order to be successful and happy, all you have to do are things that will make you satisfied with yourself. That sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Now, I want to differentiate what that means. I'm not talking about getting instant satisfaction to satisfy an urge. I'm talking about doing things that make you satisfied with yourself. And so there's a difference. The gentleman here who said creating something, that makes him satisfied. And that's different than, say, doing something that would create a short-term payback for him. And so here's the real question. Do you know what to do to accomplish that? And that all of a sudden makes it not so simple. Maybe in a given situation you could think of it, but if you're trying to create alignment between your personal, your professional, your organizational life, your educational life, all of these different contexts within which you live, it becomes a little bit more complicated, because usually there are some distracting and conflicting value propositions that are happening in all those different aspects of your life. So who can tell me what success means? Who can tell me the meaning of success in your own words? Yes, sir. Accomplishing your goals, okay. Someone else over here. Achieving goals, okay. Anyone else got an idea of what it means? Well, success is a subject that I became very obsessed with about 2.5 years ago. If you didn't notice, I wrote a book about it. And I started doing research on it by just saying, well, what does the dictionary tell me? And so the dictionary says success is basically getting what you want. And so in our society, that usually means things, getting the things we want, right? Anybody have other ideas of what success means if it's getting what you want? Well, I'll tell you, I was completely dissatisfied with that. And I said, there's got to be something more, there's something missing, because at that point in my life, there was something missing. I wasn't getting what I wanted, and I couldn't figure out why. And I started to realize that the problem comes from the conditions, certain conditions that are present in the world we live in. And it has to do with resources and positions being limited and unevenly distributed. And the other major problem has to do with success itself. Does that make sense to anybody? It does? Why does it make sense to you? Yes, sir. Okay. I'll give you my answer. I heard, I think, half of what you said. Sorry. When I became a combat engineer in the Army, they let me blow a lot of stuff up. So anyway, the reason why success is part of the problem is it's one of the very few things on this planet that every single person wants. In fact, every living thing on this planet wants success, right? Because if you get what you want, you get what you need. And let's think about this for a second. 7 billion people on the planet, 7 billion definitions of success, 7 billion approaches at getting it. And in a world where there are unlimited resources and positions, starts to see why we have so many problems we have, and why it's so difficult to get what you want. So we live in a culture that teaches us from when we're very small, all the way through school, in our professional careers, to be results-driven thinkers. And so, when we're results-driven thinkers, there's usually 4 things that can happen to us, and they're in that graphic there. You either get a reward, you get a punishment, or you may lose a reward, or something else gets taken away from you, or nothing changes, which is in the case of avoiding punishment or status quo. And so, the question I have for you is, when we're measuring resources, what are we measuring when it comes to getting what we want? What are the types of things that we use to measure success? Money. Just like that, money. What else? Excuse me? Material things. Here's a short list. Things. I like to call it things. When it comes to position, what is it that we're measuring when it comes to things? Popularity? Okay. What does that provide you with?
Your ego, boosting ego.
It does do that. Friends. Power. Influence and power. That's what position provides us. And so not only are resources unevenly distributed, but so are positions that provide us with influence and power. So the problem I have with results-driven thinking is, how can we know when we're successful? So think about this. When is enough enough, or when is enough too much when it comes to things? Usually our success drives us to want more success and more success. And we start to have if you think about that, you start to understand why resources like money in this country in particularly are completely unevenly distributed today. So how can we know if we're really successful if we're focused on things? Sorry, that TV just shut off. Is this one showing? Dave. It's on my computer. Anybody got a harmonica? Back? Okay. Dave, did you sit on the remote? Okay, so what are the keys to success when we're talking about results-driven thinking? Anybody here ever sell something or sell something for a living? What's the key to success as a salesperson?
Depends on what you're selling, but trying to find a way to convince the person to listen to you.
Before they'll listen to you, what do they have to do? Sorry? I think it's even a baser level than that. Why do they want to buy from you? Because you're competing with someone else. Trust is a part of it. So the key, customer service. So the key really is mutually beneficial relationships, helping them understand and trust that they're about to enter into the most mutually beneficial relationship that they possibly can. And so that means you have to find a way to identify the two-way value proposition, both internal and external. They have to like you in order to want to talk to you, and they have to want to buy your product or need it. And mutually beneficial relationships are pretty neat. I could say they're magical, kind of like these white chairs. They're magical because when two people or two parties enter into a mutually beneficial relationship, both walk away from the transaction feeling like they got more from it than they put in. So think about your best friends, think about business relationships, think about if you're married, your spouse. If you feel like you get more out of that relationship, those relationships, you're in a mutually beneficial relationship. And so again, how do we measure that with results-driven thinking, and how can we know? And the truth is, we don't. With results-driven thinking, we don't have a way to measure whether we're fulfilling mutually beneficial relationships or not. We think about things that worked, and we repeat that until it doesn't work. But we don't really think about what really creates that mutually beneficial relationship. So the more and more I researched the concept of success, the more I realized, this problem with results-driven thinking. And let me just stop for a second and put out a disclaimer. I'm never going to tell anybody that it's wrong to want to get good results. And you'll see that in a few minutes. There's nothing wrong with rewards or seeking them. There's a problem with our process of thinking when we focus on results. That's the point I'm trying to make. And so what I figured out I wanted to do was change the way people think about success, and the way I do that is by changing the definition, expanding the definition of success. So can anyone guess how I would do that? The answer is actually right in front of you, and it's been there the whole time. It's the tagline for my business. I'd take success, and I said, I don't care about that. I want values-driven success, which means for me to be successful, I want to get what I want and be the person I want to be. Because here's the catch, and think about this. You can't really get what you want if you aren't first the person you want to be. And that is a scalable concept. You can't get what you want if you're not the leader you want to be, if you're not the parent you want to be, if you're not the company, the organization, the nonprofit that you want to be. And so by expanding the definition of success, I also change how we think, and I add a dimension. And so the thing about results-driven thinking is it's really based on two external behavioral drivers, motivation and coercion, right? We're either trying to get rewards or we're trying to avoid punishment. Or we have the power to give rewards or the power to give punishment to try to change other people's behaviors. Core values, though, adds a whole different dimension. Now we're thinking about something first. How do I get what I want and still be the person I want to be? It makes us think a little harder, but when we actually accomplish it, regardless of the results, we can at least be satisfied with ourselves. So what's the measure? Well, the same darn things we were trying to measure before, except we're able to actually measure something now, because now we're focused on whether we actually did fulfill the value propositions that we promised when we tried to create a mutually beneficial relationship with somebody. So it changes the way we think right off the bat. And there are a lot of people who will tell me, Tom, values aren't measurable. And I'll say, you're right. I can't reach out and grab the truth. It's not tangible. But if I told you that I developed GPS theory while I was on a moon mission piloting the space shuttle to get blue cheese samples, would you be able to tell and measure if I'm being truthful or not? I see a few nodding heads. So there's some people who get what I'm saying. You can measure it. It's a 1 or a 0 in reality. And so the idea that I want to talk about that I came up with, that my book is about, and that the book tells a lot of stories to help people understand the concepts of success versus values-driven success and GPS theory itself. So a way to describe it is you use a global positioning system or a GPS to get from point A to point B geographically, right? So with GPS theory, you use your guided personal success system to get from where you are today to your definition of the person you want to be and get what you want at the same time. And you may not get what you want in the first try or the 100th try, but that's not different than if you're following results-driven thinking. It's not different at all. So here I'm going to give you guys an assignment while I'm talking the rest of the way. I want you to answer this. I call it the what words question. I think it's the most powerful question you could ever be asked. And I'll tell you a little bit about it a little bit later about how this question popped into my head one day. And I want you to first, before you do it, think about a context that you want to think about. Is it you? Is it you as a teacher, as a parent, as a leader in a company, a person who's starting up a company? What is it? What is the context? And think about that and focus on that. And then while you're going through, just start brainstorming a list of words that you want people to use to describe you. This is a timeline of my life. And we're going to ignore the first 13 or 14 years because, well, I was just a kid. And it's there to measure, it's there to show you how I measured me getting what I want as I grew up. Graduated from high school, went to college, got a degree. A couple years later, I decided I was going to join the Army. I became an enlisted soldier in the military police. Rose through the ranks, went on a deployment to Bosnia, and while I was there, I realized that I had a degree and I could do something with it. And I really had this desire to have more influence over what was happening to me. And so I applied to officer candidate school, and I got accepted. They made me a lieutenant, sent me to engineer school. And then while I was in officer candidate school and engineering school, I had the good fortune to serve with a number of guys who were from special operations, former Green Berets and Rangers. And as I compared myself physically and mentally with those guys, I realized I think I have what it takes to go and try to be somebody who can successfully complete the most difficult leadership school in the world. And I did that. A couple of ranks later, and then I decided I was going to get out. Now, I had to take a step backwards because trying to translate what you do as a military officer to people who've never had any idea of what you do, they think you shoot at targets all day and drag your knuckles, which, huh? So, anyway, the point is, I had to move back a few steps move to a position of lower responsibility than I had in the military. And I was okay with that. It was something that I recognized as a rite of passion and just a part of making this transition. And I worked for about 6 years for a company where, man, I got promoted a few times. I had some great opportunities, made quite a bit of money, had great benefits. But I really was frustrated. Anybody know what it's like to be frustrated when you work in a place where they've got this nice shiny wall plaque and it says, these are our values. We want to be that, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And then you watch them make decisions and take actions and give direction that are miles apart from that. Anybody know what that's like? Well, I left that company because I wanted to see if I could find a better situation for me, because I left an organization that was very values-driven and spent a lot of time trying to teach me how to live and how to lead by a certain set of values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. It's been over 12 years since I got out, and I can still say those words in the right order today. So when I moved to a new company, it was a national food brand, fairly large company, and I was going to be running a remote satellite site that was 2 states away from corporate headquarters. And the conditions were set for me to say, all right, this is what you've been hungry for the last 6 years since you left. You left a culture that was based on brotherhood, trust, and love. Now build one. And I did. I started to create this system around which people could learn how to think differently and increase performance. And so over the course of the next 3.5 years, we increased performance in that facility by over 310%, and that's with 0 new employees, 0 new headcount on the production floor. And after the first year, I was awarded or rewarded by the company at the highest level. They gave me a nice shiny thing and a whole bunch of money and said, "Great job, Tom." And I said, "Yay, somebody gets it. They recognize what I'm doing." And so that was the first year. We hadn't hit 310% yet. That happened 2 years later. And while I was doing all of that, this was a time where I was truly inspired. It was a very prolific time. I'm going through all this change. I'm leading this great team, and I also found a time to earn an MBA. So, does that sound like a success story to you? Did I sound like I was motivated? Anybody want to give me a round of applause? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yay, me! Well, what if I told you 2 years later I was fired? Does that just change everything? Oh man, dirty look you just gave me. So here I was. Obviously it wasn't because of performance. And I'm trying to figure out what just happened. And so I'm trying to think about why. Think about the last 6 months. And I realized that all of a sudden at the corporate headquarters, their quality department was trying to get me to change the system that we had created that was blowing the doors off of their expectations from safety, quality, and productivity standpoint. And they wanted me to take their system, which I knew was going to compromise our results. It's going to compromise profitability for the company, certainly going to create more waste, poorer quality product. And I said, no, not doing it. And I felt so confident in the approach I was taking that I actually fought back and I said, I'm not going to do it. I want you to pay attention to what I'm doing. Because you obviously thought it was good enough to give me an award 2 years ago. What is it that you're not seeing? There's something special here. And so when I finally, after the 2 or 3 weeks or months of the raw feeling of just feeling like I just got run over by a bus, I realized the reason why they let me go was they didn't understand what I was doing. And because I was pushing people, I was trying to go to the head of the quality department. He was trying to protect his political position and the relationships that he had with the people who had been in that company for 20 years. And so as I'm trying to push and pull him and others out of their comfort zone to actually lead change in a positive way, out of their results-driven thinking, I was creating adversaries instead of the advocates I was trying to create. And I didn't see it at the time, but that's what was happening. And every day I got a little bit closer to the edge, walking on a razor-thin edge. And all it took was one mistake. One word in one argument with my boss, and it was an inappropriate word, so I'm not going to make excuses. I didn't argue with him when they let me go. I said, it was wrong. That's the honorable thing to do. I made a mistake. But how does that happen? How do you create that kind of wealth for an organization, create those kind of results for an organization, and have them throw you away after one word? That was what rankled really bad. Wasn't supposed to show you that yet. So, the next 2 months, I'm trying to find a job, and a great opportunity comes up. I would say it was a dream job for me. And I go to the first interview and knocked it out of the park. And it was really an interesting day. It was an all-day interview. In the first interview, the first hour, I sat there and answered questions of 12 people who were interviewing me at once. Pretty intimidating. The second hour I spent with 14 more. The third hour I spent with a group almost as large as this because they invited every employee to come to one of their big classrooms and ask me questions about how I was going to lead the change they wanted to in that organization. And they said, Tom, we want somebody who can take this entire organization in a new direction, develop the strategies, create a plan, work with all the other departments and the community in the first 90 days, and then implement. I said, I can do that. And I told them why, and they believed me. Well, they called me back about 3 weeks later and said, Tom, let's come back for another interview. And I walked out of that interview not feeling so good. I felt really weird, spooky. Something happened in there, and I didn't get it. I wasn't sure what happened, but I thought maybe I won't get my dream job. So 2 days later, the HR director calls me up, and he says, Tom, I just want to let you know we've been having knockdown, drag-out fights about who we're going to hire for this position, you or the internal candidate. And to be honest, we were going to hire the internal candidate before we interviewed you. We just basically check off the box. But your interview changed things. And when it came down to it, we went with the devil we knew instead of the devil we didn't know. And I thanked him, got off the phone, hung it up, and went to bed that night and slept like a baby. And then the next morning I woke up pissed off. And I said, there's something wrong here. I got to understand what happened. This was a perfect fit for me. This is exactly what they said they wanted. What I wanted, and I told them I could do exactly what they said they wanted. And so I sat down in front of my computer. When I'm confused about things, I'll sit down and write out like my thoughts, try to organize them, and so that I don't get too far out there. And I started writing down all the questions I could remember from the interview. And then all of a sudden, one stopped me in my tracks because I remember the guy saying to me, Tom, let's say we hire you. Let's say you spend the first 90 days doing what you said you're going to do. Let's say you present this board with a plan and a bunch of strategies to take this organization in a different direction. Now, are you going to be frustrated if we don't support your plan even after we accept it? Yeah. I said, yes, I am going to be frustrated. I can't even imagine why you would hire me and tell me you want all of these things and not want to follow through. And as I sat back pondering their question and my answer, which was the right answer, I'm glad I gave it, because it actually made me realize, these people wanted the organization to change, but they didn't want their lives to change. They didn't want anything to do with somebody who was going to come in and stir up their pot. They just wanted everything around them to be different. And I'm going to tell you, leadership just doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. And so they ejected me before I had a chance to be a part of their organization. But all of a sudden I had this sense of panic because I was like, there is a trend here. 4 years ago, I left the company because I was frustrated with this very problem. 2 months ago, I was ejected from a company because of this very problem, and now this happened. What does this say about me? And how in the hell am I ever going to be successful if I always have to work with people who think like this? In the minute those words came out of my mouth, I felt as stupid as I've ever felt in my entire life. Because I felt helpless, like I had no control over what I could do to make things change, and I'm not a helpless person. And I sensed there I am, here's the point. I sensed I was on the very verge of a very deep and long spiritual and emotional fall from which I may never recover, because I just could not figure out a way forward from here. Where does Tom Eakin fit in? And all of a sudden a voice popped into my head and it said, Tom, what does success even look like to you? And you got to picture this. I'm home alone having this conversation with myself out loud. And I said, well, I suppose I would feel successful if people said about me, Tom was respectful, he had honor, he had integrity, he had courage, he was honest, he was creative, energetic. And all of a sudden I realized, I didn't hear one word in there that even indicated I cared about where I worked, what my job title was, how big my house was, what neighborhood it was in, the kind of car I drove, or the clothes I wore. I've been wearing these since 12th grade. And so I realized I was answering with values. And all of a sudden, my whole definition of success changed. And so I actually sat down. This moment, this day, is where this whole timeline thing came from. And I said, I need to understand this better. Because there have been some real significant, great trends that happened in my life, and some real sucky ones, like long-lasting ones that were self-inflicted. And why did they happen? And I started to realize that when I was inspired or fortunate enough to be in an organization that helped me be inspired by real values and live by values, I did a heck of a lot more. And when I was focused on results, things like not just tangible results, but things like popularity and being liked and thinking about what people would say about me, those are the times when I was at my worst. Those were times where I had a fear of, for example, when I decided I was going to be a physical education major in college because I like sports. Well, that's not the same as those dang third graders at Lincoln Elementary School, 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. 35 minutes later, I realized I was not going to be a phys ed teacher. After college, a fear of feeling like I was looking like a waste of potential, I was so busy hiding it from people that I had no clue where I was going, and I had no passion for anything, that I was partying too much. I was filling up the passion I had for life with things that were destructive. And so there was a time where I was driven to be all I could be. And then there was a time where I was hoping people would not see. I wanted them to see Superman, but I felt like Lex Luthor. And I stayed in a relationship with my ex-wife, the mother of my children, for a lot of wrong reasons for about 10 years. And that was a really long period to feel miserable, but also be successful at the same time. And one of the fears that kept me from making the change, changing the nature of that relationship, was a fear of leaving and ruining my relationship with my children. A fear of financial failure. Because I knew, because she hadn't worked in over 10 years, that I had to support 2 households if I left for a period of time. I had a fear that people would judge me if I left. Judge me as selfish, self-serving. Here's what that kind of thinking does to us. It creates this need to find a balance between risk and rewards. And that balance creates a comfort zone in us, in the way we think. We get to a certain point in our lives and we feel like, I've done some good things here. I got a great job, I got 2 cars in the driveway, I got a house. Everything is great. I don't want to lose any of that. Who cares if I drive to work going, man, I'm so glad I'm not at home right now, and I'm going home saying, what's going to happen tonight? So the comfort zone is interesting because we think it's going to keep us safe, but it's an illusion. And the reason is we don't control when the world presents motivating or coercive prospects to us. Motivation and coercion, you see, are not internal drivers. We think they are. Motivation is one of the most misunderstood words in our dictionary, in our society. We think it's an internal driver. It's not. Motivation happens when some prospect happens that looks like it has value to us. Something, somebody, somewhere, it's created outside of us. So it starts there. It's an external driver. And it's the same with coercion. Punishments are the same. We don't create punishments within ourselves. Why would we think we create rewards within ourselves? We create a desire for those things within ourselves. And the key thing about having a comfort zone like this is you stop being willing to take risks, which means you stop being willing to earn real rewards. That doesn't mean you don't keep getting them because you might be lucky. Nothing's changed yet. But things do change. The world changes around you. I promise you that. So picture this graphic I have here of the 4 universal results and the comfort zone. And imagine for a second that I made a copy of it. And that copy is semi-transparent, and I stacked it on top of that one, and I turned it 90 degrees. Make sense? Here's how we become confounded by results-driven thinking. It's when avoiding punishment looks like a reward to you. And your status quo becomes your definition of the rewards you seek. So your real punishment will be maintaining the status quo because you spend all of your time and energy trying to make sure nothing changes. And you just keep going around and around in a circle, and you realize one day you're stuck, and you don't know what to do. At any given time, we see ourselves as one of 4 different types of people. There's the completely confident, who if I ask them, are you successful, man? And they would say, hey, I'm really successful. It's awesome. I'm living the dream. Everything's perfect. I don't want anything to change. And those people are at a very high potential for other people to see them as a very huge success. And they have just as likely a risk of being seen as selfish, disingenuous, and abusive of their power and influence. There's the confident and confounded. They're the folks who would say, Tom, I feel like I've made the right moves. I went to college. I've got a nice house. I've got a nice spouse, kids. Job is great. But if I'm honest, I'm just not sure I'm creating the kind of value in this world that I'm meant to. They're confident they've done the right things, but they're a little bit unsure. And so they have just as likely a chance of being seen by others as being successful, or as someone who is stuck and afraid to try to do things different. Try to do something different than what everyone else tells them they should do. There's the completely confounded. They're the people who just go, man, I'm just screwed up and I have no idea what to do next. Some people will see them as someone who's tried and failed, as simple as that. And some people will see them as tragic, desperate, a failure. And then there's the inspired. Some are going to see them as someone who's trying to challenge the status quo. They'll respect that. They'll see them as courageous because they're trying to step outside of a traditional comfort zone. And some people will see them as a joke or a threat. The guy who realized, Copernicus, I think it was, who said, the earth is not the center of our universe, the sun is, and we rotate around it instead of the other way around. That's the kind of person I'm talking about. The interesting thing about that is we control how we see ourselves. We only have influence over how others are going to see us, and that's their decision, whether they see us as a joke, as a threat, as a hero, successful, failure. You can't control that. You can't control how you see yourself and what you're going to do to make yourself satisfied. So as I'm sitting here that morning having this conversation with myself, that's when GPS theory popped in my head, because I said, what if years ago, when I'm on this educational path that I don't belong in, I'm drinking and partying too much, what if there were a way for somebody to say to me, Tom, you're on the wrong path. You're not living by the values that you said you would. You're damn frustrating. Fix it. And in fact, someone actually did. One day my dad pulled me aside and he said, he took a risk. And that's exactly what he said. You're going nowhere in this town. You're burning bridges. You're looking like a fool. Fix it. Go join the army. That conversation saved my life. If my dad hadn't taken that risk, I might still be riding that red line real way down. What if before I got in the relationship, or when I was getting in the relationship with my now ex-wife, somebody were to notice that I was isolating myself along the way, maybe in year 1 instead of year 10, from people I loved, people I cared about, family and friends? Maybe they would have said something to me that, Tom, how can you be a loving person who's approachable to others, who cares, who wants to help others, while you're building this little shell around yourself and this household that keeps a lot of secrets? What if 10 years didn't go by in misery? What if the people in the organization I was doing great things for were getting signals from other people because other people were giving me the signals? They said, Tom, we believe in what you're doing. We agree with what you're doing. And I'd say, great, stand with me and fight. Can't do it. What if there were a safe and secure way for them to provide the kind of feedback the decision makers who had power and influence to reward and punish, and help them understand that they were not reflecting the values that they had hanging on the wall? And I'm not just saying it about me. I already told you what we accomplished for that company in one of their 4 manufacturing facilities. So certainly I care about the opportunities lost for me, but what about them? Just as much, I care about that. I care about the people I worked with. Notice something else while that green line is hitting all the way down into the depths. Where's the red line? See, I was failing. I was failing significantly. My financial runway was like right in my face. 11 days before I lost my job, after 3.5 years of financially supporting 2 households, and every penny of my savings was gone, I lost my job. 11 days after my divorce was finalized. But I never felt more successful in my entire life, if that makes any sense to any of you. So I started to work very passionately on this GPS theory idea, and all of a sudden a motivating factor came in and a job offer. I took it because I needed it. And so for the last 2 years, I was working full-time up until last month, creating a business and running a business. Working full-time. Creating a system where people can understand what values mean for each other. So what if being creative to me is different than it meant to that other company? And what if what I was doing for them meant something to them enough for them to say, Tom, why is creativity and innovation different for you than us? And why is that making a difference in how that facility is performing? So this is me. This is the person I want to be. It's not the person I am 100%. Not yet. And I'll tell you, the first time I ever shared the words on the screen in front of people, it scared the crap out of me. Because it's like I'm not wearing any clothes. I got a really hairy back, so you wouldn't like it. So that what I just showed you is my answer to the what words question. Those are my answers, and hopefully you guys have been writing some down. So the idea is powerfully social and socially powerful. What if you could create a platform where people could provide that kind of feedback about about what's most important to the culture that they're working in, and what's most important to them? Because don't you want to work in a culture that aligns with your values? And so I created it. And I created it purposefully with no target market because I wasn't sure exactly what to do with it yet. I had this idea in my head that it was inherently viral. Like, just think about it. If I sent you an email that said, these are my values, help me understand how I reflect them in my behaviors, wouldn't you be curious about what other people thought about you? And ask your 10 friends, and their 10 friends would ask their 10 friends, and it builds up. Well, when we launched the website, that didn't happen. And so I had to be fairly tenacious in trying to understand what was going on and thinking about why this is failing after I've just invested tons of energy and money in it. I realized as I talked to people who signed up for and created accounts and asked them questions, I said, what are the barriers? What are the obstacles? What are you seeing? What are your thoughts? I learned 2 things. People didn't really understand what values were. They would confuse them with things like emotions. So I'll tell you, I value happiness as much as anyone else, but happiness is not a core value. It's not something you can do. If you don't believe me, go out and try to do happy. Do happy things. It doesn't happen. It's a byproduct. It's a result. The other problem was what I talked about a minute ago. People were just afraid to kind of be vulnerable. But I'm here to tell you, the people that you will make the strongest connections with are the people who you make yourself vulnerable to. Day 3 of Ranger School, I haven't eaten in 2 days. I haven't slept in 2 days. I'm out on Malvesti Field. Most of you will recognize that if you've ever watched any shows about Ranger School. It's the part where they're slogging through the mud and they got them crawling under the barbed wire and hanging from the monkey bars and swinging around. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, 40 degrees out after a 90-degree day. People have been dropping like flies with heat exposure in the sun in the daytime and hypothermia at night. And I'm tired, and I'm thinking, I got 60 more days of this. Every fiber in my body is saying, stop, sleep, eat, do something nice for yourself. And I looked at the guy to my right, and I said, I can't do this. I'm in a school with some of the toughest people in the world, and I just said to the guy to my right, I can't do this. And you know what he said to me? He said, Eakin, if you finish tonight with me, we'll quit tomorrow. And after we finished that round, we got some sleep, about 2 hours, and we woke up. He kicked me and he said, hey, Eakin, you still going to quit tomorrow? And the only reason I got through Ranger School was because I got through that night. And the only reason I got through that night was because I laid myself bare to somebody who I hardly knew and who might have just punched me in the face for being a wimp. So it was cool. So we started also with our app because it seems too personal for people to say, how do we take it to a different context? So we started to create workshops for culture building using the GPS Theory app as a way to help them measure how well their culture is doing. And we created a program for families, and later this month we're going to test a similar workshop for entrepreneurs. So I don't know if you have a smartphone and if it'll work, but here's something I'm going to ask you, my guided personal success system. You're all a part of it tonight. If you can scan that QR code, it'll take you to the GPS Theory Assessment app. It takes about 15 seconds to turn a few dials and say, based on what you know about me over the last hour, I know you don't know me well, but mainly I just want you to see what it's like. What's it like to rate somebody? And while some of you are doing that and trying it out, I don't see many of you trying it out, I want you to raise your hand if you wrote down some answers to the what words question. Who did their work?
I have one answer, just kind of sum it all up, is he lived for the welfare of others. Does that kind of answer at least maybe the family?
It's a good answer. And I probably wasn't very good at giving direction there. I'm looking for one-word answers like I was giving earlier, like honor.
Sacrificial.
Sacrificial, okay. Ouch. Anybody else? Do you have courage on your list?
I did it.
All right, because he just showed courage. He just stood in front of everyone, and he's not even the guy talking on stage, and said, I want to do things for other people. Anybody else want to share one of their words?
Helpful.
Helpful.
Happy.
Excuse me? Happy. Just remember, it's not a value. So we all want that, but it's a byproduct. Integrity. What does integrity mean to you? So there's like 3 or 4 words that I've done research on, and integrity is one of them. And I won't argue with your answers because integrity is one of those difficult ones. Of being whole. So think about this. If you have a set of anywhere from 4 to 8 core values, and you're 100% on most of them, you're not whole. You're not quite there. You're missing something. Anybody else? These are good words. They're powerful words. They're the kind of words that will really move you and inspire you, because inspiration comes from when you're doing something you believe in. And if you can believe in words like honor and integrity, perseverance, resilience, charity, faithfulness, love, those are things I want people to say about me when I'm dead. And I don't want to wait until I'm dead to find out if they would. Because if they don't, I want to fix that. Because you know what? That's the legacy I have. That's the one thing that I'll leave, is that story. And so I want you guys to think about that. 2 days after I came up with the GPS theory app idea, I was driving to a meeting, and for some reason, I'm not a poet, but I came up with a poem. And since I titled this, "It Takes a Tenacious Failure," I wanted to share it with you. It's called An Ode to Failure, and don't worry, it's short. I know I've been talking a while. It goes like this. Foul, foul failure. Thou art manure. Repulsive, equalizer of man. Fertilizer of introspect. And the seeds of success, not discovered yet. I want to thank you for your time and attention tonight. I really appreciate you coming out. Thank you very much. I wanted to make sure if anyone had any questions.
We're getting pretty close to class time here, Tom. Okay. I'm sure Tom is going to hang around and answer any questions for you. I know some of you need to move on to class yet tonight. Make sure that you have your passports and you get them stamped in the back, and Tom will hang around up front for those of you that want to continue to chat with him. Thank you very much.